Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, creator of videos on all sorts of pieces of retro gaming hardware. Last week on this channel we looked at the Commodore CD32, a so-called all-in-one multimedia device designed to take advantage of the same marketplace as the Philips CDI. These ugly black boxes never seem to garner much fanfare, especially when you consider that the CD32 was basically just a more expensive version of an Amiga 500 with a built-in CD drive. So with the CD32 essentially dead on arrival, this obviously gave Commodore the ability to be able to identify what went wrong with the product. So 2 years later, you would expect the release of the Amiga CD32 to be a very different story. However, as we already know, things did not quite play out like that. So, with all this in mind, where did it all go wrong again? Let's find out. This is the story of why the Amiga CD32 failed. Yeah! The Amiga CD32, like the name suggests, is a 32-bit games console featuring a CD drive. This system, codenamed Spellbound and developed by Commodore, was announced in July of 1993 at the Science Museum in my home city of London. Commodore products, including those of which had carried the Amiga branding, had traditionally always sold very well in my country, so it would come as no surprise whatsoever that the announcement of this device would take place here. Harkening back once more to the Commodore CD32, which featured many of the internals of the Amiga 500, the Amiga CD32 on the other hand was based on different hardware from the Amiga computer family. The Amiga CD32 was based on Commodore's Advanced Graphics Architecture chipset and is very similar in spec to the Amiga 1200. The Amiga 1200 was Amiga's third generation Amiga computer aimed at the home computer market. This platform featured improvements over the A500 and included advantages such as a 32-bit design, an AGA chipset that increased the colour palette from 4,096 colours to a whopping 16.8 million, and graphic hardware offering improved sprite capacity and faster graphical performance. So, going straight back to the Amiga CD32 and its similar specifications, you could take this platform and upgrade it with a keyboard, floppy disk drive, hard drive, RAM and mouse. Then, hey presto, you pretty much had the equivalent of an Amiga 1200 computer, much like with how you could use the CD32 as an Amiga 500. An additional hardware design the CD32 featured was something discussed in my previous video, known as the Akiko chip. One of the functions of this chip was that it ensured that all Amiga CD32 games would run exclusively on the CD32, giving the device somewhat of a unique selling point over other Amiga products. Unlike CD-TV games where you could buy a CD drive for your Amiga 500 and just run CD-TV games that way instead. Amusingly though, an external CD-ROM drive for the A1200 was developed anyway that featured an Akiko chip. This one though never made it past the prototype stage, but an existing drive can be found at the Computer Museum in Leicester, England. Speaking of CD32 games, there were around 175 different games released for the platform on compact discs, which is not a bad sized library. Sadly though, many of these games are simply just ports of games that are available on other Amiga computers anyway, which is a bit annoying. Most of the games for the Commodore CD32 also run on the CD32. However, CPU speed differences stopped some of the earlier titles from working. Pair all this with the fact that the system could essentially function as an A1200, it means you can play many floppy disk based games as well. If we include backwards compatibility with the system, the library of games you can play on this console is truly gargantuan. In September of 1993, the device was demonstrated at the World of Commodore Amiga show, At the Pasadena show, Commodore US President Jim Dion would run through plans for the Amiga CD32 sales and their strategy to use the device to bring the company back into profit. The platform was promised to be on sale in some cities by Christmas of that year, and to have the product reach a wider distribution network by January of 1994. Computer Gaming World published reports that a large chunk of software would be available immediately for the platform, but speculated whether there would be enough US developers to make investments in the system worthwhile, especially when taking the CD-TV fiasco into account. On the CD32's release, Commodore marketed the system as the world's first ever 32-bit CD games console, although if you are a console connoisseur like myself, you will already know that this was one big fat lie, and the FM Towns Marty was released exclusively in Japan 7 months before the release of the CD32. If you are interested in learning more about the Marty, I recently uploaded a video on whether or not the FM Towns Marty is worth playing today, so feel free to check that out following this video. Anyway, whilst the CD32 was not the first type of system like this in the world, it was the first 32-bit CD games console released in the West. So, at least that is something to brag about, I suppose. Further to this, a case can be argued for the CD32 to be the first true 32-bit CD games console, based on the fact that its processor featured a 16-bit data bus externally, as opposed to the Marty's 16-bit one. But now we are getting a little bit pedantic. The platform eventually saw releases in Europe, Canada, Australia and Brazil. At first, the system was fairly well received in Europe, with the platform claiming its greatest sales victories in both Germany and the United Kingdom, Europe's two largest national markets. In fact, marketing in the UK was rather strong in general for the platform, and featured a hilarious aggressive ad placed on a huge billboard outside of the UK Sega headquarters reading, "To be this good takes ages," taking a shot at the Sega Mega CD add-on, which obviously required consumers to own a Mega Drive to be able to use. In fact, this marketing was going so well that by Christmas after the launch, a huge 38% of all CD-ROM drive sales throughout the country belonged to that of the CD32, crushing the Mega CD and other competitors in the field over the period. Elsewhere on planet Earth, a US release was also in the pipeline, and was targeting the release for February of 1994. However, this release was ultimately canned due to serious financial difficulties Commodore were beginning to face. During 1993, general sales for Commodore dropped by over 20%, causing over $366 million in losses. By this point in history, Commodore 64 sales had diminished, and Amiga sales, although selling quite well in Europe, were not enough to fill the deepening void. In regards to a potential US release for the platform, Commodore's Amiga brand never had a great presence compared to elsewhere to begin with. However, at one point in time, Commodore were hoping that the Amiga CD32 could change the company's fortunes in this regard. These hopes and dreams, however, were quickly destroyed due to an injunction made against the company. Basically, Cadtrack held a patent for the XOR cursor, and as a result beat Commodore in a court battle, resulting in Commodore owing them $10 million. During this injunction, a federal judge ordered an injunction preventing Commodore from importing anything into the United States. A big issue with this was that Commodore's Amiga CD32 inventory, which they had stockpiled for their planned US launch, was all manufactured over in the Philippines, meaning that Commodore had all of these units they were unable to sell based on the injunction, while simultaneously not being able to generate the funds needed due to the units being locked up over there, leading to a completely catch-22 situation for Commodore. Due to this dire situation, the CD32 never officially launched in the US, and by April of 1994, Commodore began the initial phase of voluntary liquidation of the company's assets, and by April 29th, Commodore declared bankruptcy and ceased trading altogether, killing not only the chances of the Amiga CD32 doing well, but slaying the Commodore technology giant completely. The Amiga CD32 was only on the market 8 months before it reached its fate, and the sales of over 100,000 units in Europe alone were not enough to save the company. Further to all of this, it is also an interesting footnote that CD32s did end up becoming available in the US anyway, most of which came over the border via Canada. Commodore UK even provided some hardware and software specifically for the US market, which included an MPEG video module. This was possible after the death of Commodore International, due to the fact that Commodore UK was the only subsidiary to survive the bankruptcy, and even placed a bid to buy out the rest of the operation. Commodore UK though lost the bid to German PC conglomerate Escon, and as a result went into liquidation on August 30th, 1995. So ladies and gentlemen, that was the sad story of why the Amiga CD32 failed. Which failed platform would you like to see me cover next on this channel? I have a large range of videos on gaming history for you to peruse and enjoy. So if you had fun watching today, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for weekly videos like this straight to your multimedia entertainment device every single week. Finally, my channel Top Hat Gaming Man is funded by the fantastic support I receive from my beautiful Patreon benefactors. I will always be here as long as you support me. So shout outs to Carl Johnson, Shizuka Kobayashi, Greg Hooper, Lawrence C, Synth Spaces, Kevin Verhaley, Andrew Bazanski, Edward O'Reilly, Tom Elliott, Mark S. Hines, The Gaming Muso, Quang DX, SpongeMatt B, JD Robbins, Michael Baker, Andy Aldridge, and all of my other patrons. Thank you all for changing my life.